So if we were playing Jeopardy right now, and who's that guy, Alex? Okay, so he's got 6, right? So you'd be standing there and you're looking at the big board and there's 2 contestants here, and you're here, and you're the first one up. And one of the categories was New Testament. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, right? You go, I know that stuff, but I'm not, they might ask a weird question. Alex, New Testament for 100. And the answer is, we don't know where he was born. We don't know when he was born. We don't know if he was married. We don't know what caused his death. And we don't know when he died. And we don't know where he is. The answer would be, who is Luke? Think about it. When is the last time you heard a sermon on Luke? Not the book, Luke. Steve, you ever heard one?
Nope, never did one.
You know why? The book, obviously it's a great gospel, right? We don't, what this class is going to be, this first session is just about what people think they know about Luke. But really, I mean, all those things I just said are true. We don't know. Now, here's the weird thing about Luke. Only Gentile to write in the New Testament. If you put Luke and Acts together, and it was one work at one time, that's the most, or if we broke it down into percentage, it's about 29-30% of the New Testament, more than Paul. We don't know anything about it. Now, when we start looking at this, I was handing these out, and Marianne goes, "That's Paul." And I went, "No, I didn't. I didn't upload the wrong picture." "No, that's Luke. For this conversation, that's Luke." And again, nobody knows what Luke looked like. Now, if you want to do on your own time, if you want to listen to a book, or if you want to read a book that's a novel, it's a novel about Luke, this is okay. It's called Luke's Story, and it's a novel. And because it's a novel, they take licenses and stuff. But, I mean, a lot of it is kind of historically accurate, okay? In this book, they're going to tell you that Luke was a slave. And there's reasons to think he might have been a slave, okay? Then, if you're really desperate, you can listen to this guy for, it's at least 24 hours. And it's each, I think it's 28 hours. And each book is approximately an hour lecture that I went through with this guy. He's okay. There's some sketchy things about him, but it's okay. This guy here, he's the resident expert on Luke at the Dallas Theological Center. And if you read one of his books or look up a lecture by him or interview on him on Luke, it's really good. Then this is the guy I love, which is N.T. Wright. And he was the guy that I used extensively for the study about Paul. Okay? So if we were going to do, I've already told you the Jeopardy question, if we were going to do this study of just the book of Luke, to kind of get through it and say everything in just the book of Luke, it'd be 24 sessions, approximately an hour. We don't have that, okay? So what we're going to try to do in June is just bring out, this first session is going to be on who was Luke, and then when we get into the book of Luke, I can't go through all the accounts in the book. It would take too long. So I'm just going to zero in on here and here and here and here, okay? I've already told you Luke's the longest gospel in the New Testament. It equals about 1/3 of the New Testament. He exceeds Paul's letter by about 2%. Some people think his narrative spreads over 60 years, but we're going to kind of debate that. I've already told you that the book of Luke and Acts is one work, and it's later split. So, this is what we know. We know that when we did the study about Paul, we spent a lot of time in Acts. And we know that on, you could call it his fourth mission, which would be to go to Rome, he was put under house arrest in Rome. And while he was there, he was free to preach and talk to people being under house arrest. The interesting thing about Luke is that, and we talked about Paul, we know that Paul was in Rome, and then there's some years that are missing. So some people, like we talked about the last time, some people think Paul went on a mission to Spain, then he came back, then the persecution started, he and Peter are killed. The interesting thing about Luke, he doesn't talk about that. When we get to the end of Luke, he just talks about him being in this rented house, he's able to preach the word. That's where he leaves it off. They think that when we studied Paul, Antioch became like a central base for the early Christian church. They think Luke might have been converted in Antioch. Okay? Luke is a Gentile. That means he was either a pagan or he just subscribed to one of the Greek philosophies to try and explain things. But they think he might have been converted at least, and maybe even born in Antioch. Where's Antioch? When we did the study of Paul, you remember we had all these mission trips, and over here would be Greece and traveling and so forth. But remember this: when Paul gets converted on his way from Jerusalem to Damascus, he has the light, right? He goes blind. And then Ananias comes and he gets his sight back, and then we discover that from Damascus, Paul just disappears into whatever you want to call it, greater Arabia for 3 years. He comes back, goes to Damascus, gets in trouble because he's visiting friends, telling them about the new religion, so he has to go here, gets in trouble again, and then what happens? They send him back to, it'd be right here, to Tarsus for 10 years, right? That's what we learned the first time. But then we heard that Barnabas, right, came to Tarsus and recruited Paul to go to Antioch and help with the conversion of new believers, okay? Maybe it's at this point that Luke gets converted, okay? Some people speculate that Luke was from Antioch because he seems to take a little pride when he mentions the city of Antioch, like civic pride. Maybe like, that's my hometown. We learned in our other study that the first time the word Christian is ever used is in Antioch. They think he might have been a Stoic, and that's just, he subscribed to a particular Greek philosophy. And it's just a way of looking at life and how to deal with life. So, and remember, Paul would have been very familiar with all these philosophies because you'll remember Tarsus. All the great philosophers from Athens went to Tarsus because of a war, and their offspring, and they got a bunch of people talking the different philosophies and everything. And Paul would have been exposed to it in Tarsus. So anyway, if we try to put together his life, it might go something like this. He's a Greek. Okay? He might have been pagan, or he just subscribed to a Greek philosophy. We think maybe he's converted in Antioch. Paul will talk about Luke in his letters. I think he mentions Luke 3 times. Okay? In those letters, Paul will refer to Luke as his physician, his beloved physician. The reason people think that this whole thing about Luke was a doctor, I think it was Steve was saying Sunday about the quality of the Greek used in 2 Peter. And they go, well, Peter didn't write it. The quality of the writings are so. You go to Luke, that's an extremely high level of Greek. And the way he describes things, it kind of lends itself that he kind of had a scientific mind. So that's why people think, and he'll use terms during Luke that make you think he was a physician. The question is, and there's a big debate, would it be unusual for a physician to be a slave in what's now Turkey? The answer is no. In that novel I told you that you can read, it's all about his owner sent him to this school, I think it was in Antioch, and that's where he learned to become a physician. So it's very plausible that he was a slave and was a doctor. He's highly educated. When you get into the book of Acts, you have Luke saying, okay, this happened, this happened, this happened. But when you get to the 16th chapter, he starts dropping terms like we did this, we did that, we did that. So that would infer he's there, okay? That Luke, when he's first writing the book of Acts, might just, okay, this is what I learned. But you get further into the book of Acts, and he starts saying, we did this, we did that. These are famous, these are known as the we passages. They think that these we passages started in Paul's second missionary trip. So that would mean he might have been on that second trip with Paul. The second missionary trip. There's a big argument. There's going to be a verse that we're going to talk about that says where Paul is writing a letter to Timothy, and he said, everybody's forsaken me. I'm by myself, with the exception of Luke. So that makes you think that Luke stayed in Rome with Paul, maybe during the persecution. We don't know, because he doesn't talk about the persecution. So the big question is, did Luke stay with Paul in Rome to the end? Then he left? Some people say yes, some people say no. And I've told you this before. When you get into the book of Luke and Acts, there's something really weird about it. Okay? So he gets converted. But every account of a Roman, like the centurion or the governor, especially with the centurions, he deals with them with respect and honor. Okay? You go, well, why is that a big deal? Well, if you were a Jew 2,000 years ago, a Roman, especially somebody in the army, not your friend, right? But you listen to his accounts. The Roman centurion whose servant, slave, was dying, right? And he sends messengers because he's not even good enough to go talk to Jesus, right? And what does Jesus say? I've not seen faith like this in all of Israel. He goes back, well, that's kind of putting the soldier up there, right? Right? When he talks about when Paul is arrested, it's a Roman soldier, centurion, that saves his life. And you go, well, why is that? Well, part of the logic behind that might be, and I mentioned this before, that the book of Luke and the book of Acts was written as a legal document. Why was it written as a legal document? Before you get to Rome and you present your case to Caesar, who would have been Nero, it's like going to court now. You've got to lay it out. So some people think that's how he laid it out, right? That Luke and Acts was actually going to be used when and if he ever got a hearing or a trial with Caesar. Okay? Here, when in Luke, in Galatians 4:14, he's writing, and then he talks about, he gives greetings, and he mentions Luke. So we know Luke is with him when he's in Rome. Then here is where he refers to the beloved physician. So the question then is, why does he have a doctor with him? You remember when we studied Paul, he said that Satan had put a thorn in his flesh? No, we don't know what that is. Maybe Luke was taking care of him because of that. Okay? So,
well, and if this is a legal document, he could be writing it for Paul, or he's staying with Paul to get it all down.
yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, we know that when Paul does his third missionary trip, which we're going to call when he's arrested in Jerusalem, they take him up the coast, they put him on a grain ship, and he heads for Rome, that Luke uses the we passage. Luke was on the boat. Okay? That's the same boat that wrecked, and they all had to swim to shore. Okay? So Luke was there. So we think he's on the second missionary trip, and we think he's on the third, which takes him to Rome. Let's see. Here in 2 Corinthians 12:7-9, he talks again about this thorn in his flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I've pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, the Lord said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power has made you perfect in weakness. So whatever the affliction is, it's not going away, and you're going to have it till you depart this earth. Now, we talk about where did Luke come from? Where did Luke die? How did Luke die? The Catholic Church has a bunch of traditions, okay? And one of the traditions is he leaves Paul in Rome, goes back to Greece, is preaching and doing good things, and I guess he's written, his Luke, Acts, and then he gets in trouble with some locals and they hang him for retreat. That's one theory. The other theory is he stays with Paul until Paul is gone. Then he goes back to Greece, and he's not hung from a tree, and he dies when he's 84 years old. So take your pick. He either learned to or lived to be 84 years old, or he's hung from a tree. I mean, you can take your pick. It says he was arrested by a mob at the age of 84. So now we're at the book of Luke. There's even controversy as to who wrote the book of Luke. If you study this and you look at a liberal commentary, I was watching these classes of a guy at Yale, okay, and he's saying one thing, but then if you look at the others, you're getting another view of it, right? So what we know is these two gentlemen here, which wrote manuscripts in the 2nd century, which would have been between 100 AD and 199 AD, both say that the original transcript said, according to Luke. Okay? Then there's all this, we think he was a physician. Then it goes on to say, Luke is only mentioned 3 times in the whole New Testament at these spots right here. And it's Paul talks about it. Then we get to the book of Luke, and I kidded Sean about, do you read Greek? And she couldn't hear me. It was Sunday morning. Oh, you read Greek, right? She goes, yeah. Like, she didn't hear me. No, seriously, do you read Greek? She still didn't hear me. Oh, yeah. I said, do you read Greek? No. So, I want you to read from what Bible are you reading from?
Well, this one is the New American Standard.
New American Standard. Read Luke 1, verses 1 through 4. If you can't see that, there's actually Greek up there.
Luke 1:1-4. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in a constructive order, most excellent Theophilus.
Okay, read that one more time.
The whole thing?
Okay.
Okay. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in a constructive order, most excellent Theophilus.
Now come up here.
Come up here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this is the original Greek, right?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, but you just start,
Here.
read the English first.
Okay.
Okay.
Since many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things fully attested among us, as delivered to us by the original eyewitnesses who became stewards of the word, it seemed good to me also, having meticulously traced everything again from the top, to write it down in sequence for you, O most excellent Theophilus.
Now, was there a difference in the English version and the Greek version? There's a big difference. If you take this, read the word where he says, I studied this very carefully.
Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of the things accomplished among us, they have see, just as they have handed down to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully.
Stop. In English, he says, I investigated everything carefully. If you take what is written in Greek, it says meticulously. If you took that definition further, it would be the equivalent of saying, I did an autopsy. I really, really did it. Okay? Then it goes on, but then you'll find it in the beginning of Luke, in the beginning of Acts. I told Steve, somebody asked me like, well, you're going to do this Luke thing, and they're asking a question, and I go, the most important thing you got to do in any kind of study of Luke is find out who was Theophilus. Because he wrote 2 books addressed to Theophilus, right? And the other interesting thing is, he says, most excellent Theophilus. Well, I know in the 90s, excellent, kids would go, that's excellent, you know. But I think back then when you're saying excellent, what did he mean?
High ranking.
High ranking? What?
Someone in authority.
Someone in authority? In the book of Acts, when Paul is taken to the governor, they refer to the governor as, it was something like most excellent Felix or something like that. He was a man. So here's the theory. Theophilus, who was Theophilus? All you're given is he's mentioned 2 times in the longest scriptures in the New Testament. It wasn't him. Well, you can take it like this. You can say Theophilus was a man of great authority. Theophilus could have been an official. Theophilus could have been his owner. Don't know. But then at the end he goes, you know, he's meticulously written all this stuff down in the sequence that had happened. O most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the reliability of things you have been told. He's already been told these things, right? So did he send Luke out? You know, Luke's my guy. Send him to college. I know if I send him out there, he'll get to the bottom of it. Is that what this is? Could be. Could be. Okay?
Did you study that Theophilus was a early Christian patriarch?
There's a lot of theories
Syrian
about.
bishop?
There are theories about him that say he was all sorts of things.
Moralistic form of Christianity.
Oh, the word Theophilus means God is with us. Is that what you're talking about?
No, there was a guy. Theophilus was an early Christian patriarch.
I'll give you some theories about Theophilus. Some say he was a Roman official. Some say Theophilus, and I have it written down. This terms mean, what did you say?
One who loves God.
One who loves God. Some people think Theophilus is just a letter to Christians, to a group of people, not one person. Okay. But whoever Theophilus was, when we did the whole study of Paul, we talked about something called patronage. Remember what patronage was? Becky's got a problem. That Sean's doing something with Becky in their business. Becky comes to me. You got to do something about Sean. It's killing me. I can't sell at this with her doing that. I go to Donna, and we have a formal dinner. Remember this? Yeah. We're talking about philosophy. We had this blue cake. And over that cake, I go, oh, by the way, Donna, Becky's coming. She got this problem with price that Sean is charging her for grain, and that means she's got to raise it. Anyway, so the patronage thing is, we work out a compromise. You are now, I'm your patron, okay? That means whenever I need you, you're there, okay, forever and ever. And if you have a problem, it's like the mafia. You got a problem, I got a problem. Those people are mean to you, they're mean to me. And that's the way it was. So some people think Theophilus had a patron. He was the patron to Luke. Go out there, be meticulous. I mean, get it all down. Write it, bring it back to us so we'll know what's true. There were a lot of oral traditions going on. There were a lot of stories that were just verbal, okay? This is what we know. Mark, written first, okay? Who wrote Mark? Mark is written by John Mark. John Mark, if we go back to the story of Paul, he's the guy that goes with Barnabas and Paul. They go over here, and they do some stuff, and then when they come back to the continent, Turkey, John Mark says, I gotta go. Where are you going? I said, I gotta go. And he goes back to Jerusalem, right? So on the next missionary journey, Barnabas, Paul, talking about that, and Barnabas goes, well, we'll get John Mark, and maybe and then Paul goes, we ain't taking him. Because when he just left and so on. So, big split, right? Barnabas and Paul don't do the second mission trip. It's just Paul. John Mark falls in with Peter. Okay? They believe the book of Mark is Peter's telling John Mark what happened. They believe that Matthew was written by Matthew. What was Matthew?
Tax collector.
It's more than that. Let's go up into, say we're around Galilee and stuff, and the Romans go, these guys fish, we want a piece of that action, we think it should be this much for the year. They go, we think we should be able to collect this much taxes for this 12 months. And so Matthew, along with everybody else, said, well, I'll guarantee you all that money, and then I'll make a little extra on the side. So he bought the right to tax. Okay? He bought the right. Romans says, don't care how you do it, this much goes to us. Okay? And whatever you do. That's why they're hated so much. But he's also a collector. He's like a guy working at a port. Everything that comes in, got to come in through him. He's got to write it down very meticulously. So when you go to Matthew, you get the sense that's Matthew. He took notes. He wrote very clearly, succinctly. Okay? All right. So we're just gonna, for the sake of this study, let's just say Theophilus is a wealthy, influential man, probably from Antioch, and he's probably the patron of Luke. We've already talked about what the patronage system was. Now, this is an interesting thing. When we read Luke 1, verses 1 through 4, it says, many have undertaken. Well, who's the many? Right? All we know is that Mark is first, then Matthew, then Luke. So maybe there were just stories, you know? And somebody says, well, maybe we should get somebody to run down everything and kind of put it into one condensed writing, right? So maybe that's what Luke's doing here. He talks about, he went and spoke to the original eyewitnesses. You know, what does that mean? That means Jesus is on the cross, right? what did Jesus say to John?
This is your mother.
Mother.
John, or mother, behold your son. John, behold your mother. What's that mean?
Take care of it.
You got to take care of her. So did Luke go in doing all these interviews of people who were original eyewitnesses? Did he talk to John? How long did Mary live after the crucifixion? He spoke to Mary. And that's why when you get into the book of Luke, you're going to have this whole narrative that's not in the other Gospels. Okay? He spoke. He interviewed. So he's talking to Mary. What happened? We've already talked about Mark being the first. Okay, here are your books of the Bible. But Mark is the first book. And then what this diagram shows you, how much of Mark is in Luke, how much of Mark is in Matthew, then how much of Luke is unique just to Luke, how much of Matthew is unique just to Matthew, how much of Mark is unique just to Mark. It's a very small percentage. Large percentage is unique to Luke. Maybe they read or they had the other Gospels and they felt like it needed more explaining. Make it alive. What were people thinking? So, Luke's source, since Luke goes on missionary trips with Paul, Luke's primary source is Paul. Okay? Matthew wrote Matthew. Peter is Mark. Okay? But the difference is that Luke then goes on this extensive interviewing of all these people in addition to just talking to Paul. We get into the whole subject of Mary. Okay? When he talks about Mary and the pregnancy and stuff like that, he gets real exact. He talks in terms that are almost, well, they are medical terms. Okay? But what Luke does with his story, he's going to give you well, we've already talked about the way he treats the Romans. Oh, well, okay. I'm going to have to use my book, actually. So when we get to, okay. Tell me when I'm done. So when we get into the book of Luke, there are people who come to the book of Luke that we really, I mean, Mary's mentioned, yes, in the other Gospels. Elizabeth is not. Did he interview Elizabeth? Did he have the opportunity not only to interview John, who was taking care of Mary, right? Did he have the opportunity to interview the other disciples, including Peter and Matthew? 500 people saw Jesus after his resurrection. Did Luke interview them? Some of them. Because some of those stories aren't in the other Gospels. The book of Luke is all about reconciling. The book of Luke and Acts is all about reconciling the Jewish faith and the new faith, which is Christianity. Okay? the story of Peter being told by God, it's okay to eat this stuff. If I made it, it's okay. That's in Acts, right? It's okay. We don't have to be totally separate from the rest of the world. Remember when we studied Paul, it was the whole Paul thing was, okay, I guess we'll let Gentiles become believers. And they call it the way. They can become believers. But they got to become Jewish first. That was a big deal, right? Whole book of Luke and the book of Acts is about inclusion of these Gentiles, pagan or whatever they were, and the new faith. Okay? Now, you're going to get to a page that looks like this that divides the book of Luke up. Okay? There, in the book of, in Luke, chapter 1, 5 through chapter 2, 52, you get the story of God's announcement of what's about to happen. Gabriel tells Zechariah that this unbelievable miracle is going to happen in your life, right? And what's the miracle that's going to happen in Zechariah's life? He's old, right? And this particular thing that happens when Zechariah is in the temple. He's in there are 12 tribes of Israel. They had a lottery system. And every year a priest gets to go into the temple because he's not there, but if he were there, you would sit there and petition God to forgive the people in the country of all the sins, right? Zechariah's in there doing his job, right? Boom. Gabriel comes up. And Gabriel says, Elizabeth's going to become pregnant. And I'm going to tell you all about what your son's going to be like and all these things. And then what does Zechariah do, which is maybe not the right thing to do? He didn't laugh about it. But he kind of like, hey, that can't happen. I'm an old guy, right? And so then what happens to Zechariah? Couldn't talk, right? Until the baby comes, right? Who's Gabriel?
Messenger.
Messenger of the Lord.
Who's Michael? Who's Gabriel? Gabriel in the Bible. Gabriel delivers messages. Go to the book of Daniel, and we'll cover it later. Daniel's praying, and both of them appear, Michael and Gabriel. Michael is when you're going to have a battle. Gabriel, I'm here to tell you this. Okay? Gabriel says, I stand in the presence of God, and you didn't believe what I just told you. So, and that happened. Then where does Gabriel appear? To Mary. And what does he say to her?
You're going to have a child.
You're going to have, but I've never been with a man. Right? But she accepts it. If you read the last of her statement, she accepts it. She's not like Zechariah. She accepts it. So, the point is this, and we'll stop there, but, and we're going to get more, this whole thing about the angels, I'm going to take a real deep dive into the temptation. There's all kinds of stuff that needs to be discussed there. But when I take that deep dive into the temptation, I'm going to come back to Gabriel and Michael, okay? And Satan and stuff. So that's what we're going to do next week. Okay? All right.